Hey everyone, Kuro the Artist here, and welcome back to another Ben 10 breakdown. By now, we're probably all familiar when Zeke escaped the Omnitrix.
I was never you when the sample was taken for the Omnitrix. I was trapped inside.
So with Ghost Freak's species, Zeke was able to escape the Omnitrix and then resurrect himself in every subsequent appearance as long as a single strand of DNA remained. Pretty cool premise, right? But later on, a similar thing happens with Big Chill. Sure, some of the alien instincts make their way into Ben's habits, but Big Chill also seemed like an entirely different person during his reproduction cycle too.
Go on. Fly.
That was weird. What just happened?
But while Zeke had a pre-existing embedded consciousness, Big Chill seemed to be a created consciousness, as if the Omnitrix created Big Chill's personality out of nothing. And then there's Wrath, who also turns Ben into such an uncharacteristically outlandish person, that much of the main cast, including Ben himself, often referred to Wrath as if he was his own entity. And back to embedded consciousness, Rad was able to fuse with Ben via a transformation, where two minds inhabited one body, similar to Zeke. So it looks like these Ultimatrix devices can not only contain multiple consciousness, but somehow create them as well. Slap on the fact that it also created physical forms for a handful of Ben's aliens, and also, whatever you can say happened with Chromostone here, and then later on we'll literally see malware rip Ben out from inside of feedback. It really makes you question, what exactly are these transformations? We're led to believe that Ben's physical body is actually mutating into these forms, and his mind remains the same. But with all of these other instances, it makes you think that there's something more going on here. And this episode explores that concept in full force when Ben gets trapped inside of the Ultimatrix and comes face to face with his ultimate forms, who claim they've been enslaved into Ben's device and want to sacrifice Ben for their freedom. This plot may seem a bit random, but it's arguable that this tracks back all the way to the first episode, where we briefly see Ben's eyes flicker when turning back from Ultimate Spider Monkey.
You okay?
Yeah, that's a little different.
Dwayne also used to hint that Ben was scared to use his ultimate forms. I imagine the plot of this episode was planned very early on, but it didn't get as much foreshadowing and focus as they might have hoped once they got here, since they were dealing with all of the Greg and Ultimate Kevin and Dagon stuff. But even on its own, I think it's a very interesting and enjoyable episode. But how exactly are these ultimate forms alive? And once you find out you've been indirectly possessing other living beings and forcing them into combat, what is the right solution? That's what we're going to focus on today with this episode's breakdown, The Ultimate Sacrifice. But if this is your first breakdown and you're curious about how my rating system works, there's a detailed description down below along with a link to all my previous breakdowns, but by all means watch this one first. I'm sure you'll still enjoy it. And if you're watching this video the day it comes out, join Kellen, Ash, and I on our second channel, The Rust Bucket, where we will be unveiling a special alien Kellen made for the 5-Whale multiverse. One he's so proud of that we're dedicating a whole event to it. But if you missed the live, you can still rewatch it with the link down below. And now, on to the breakdown. On October 28th, 2011, Dwayne McDuffie teamed up with John Mark to give us the Ultimate Sacrifice. Ben gets sucked into the Ultimatrix and find that his ultimate form have come to life, begging for freedom. Gwen and Kevin each try their own solution, where Gwen astro projects into the Watch to join Ben and try to help him, and Kevin flies off to Galvan Mark II to ask Azimuth for help. As much as I love this episode, this red robot right here has always been my #1 example with how forgettable and throwaway a lot of these one-off villains tend to be in terms of design. Like, this is the most let's get this shit over with design I've ever seen in the entire show. Next to the Synthroid and UA Edel, it just felt like UAF going on for so long. The creative juice tank has been down to its last few drops, and we're left with designs that look like this. And of course it's red and silver.
Everybody along, I'm the toughest guy in the galaxy.
Lot to unpack there as well. Uses the same generic robot voice that it does for all mechanical things now. But also this robot seems to show opinions, like it actually is after Glory, which I guess you could just accept at this point. And with robotical looking aliens like Clockwork and Atomics, I could even see a case being made that this is an alien itself and not entirely robot. Like, we're just at this point now. Gwen over here looking fire though. Manifesting energy animation combined with the quick digital motion blur. It's perfect for the shot. This is an immediate 180 with the visuals. This looks great. This is something Classic used to do all the time. Humongosaur as well. Goes by very quick, but the going ultimate lines are red, which is enough to tell you something's up. Although since UAF and Omniverse reserve red color schemes for albedo, maybe this should have been a different color, or maybe even pink to tie into the pink eyes from the Fame episode. Despite this no longer being Ben, he still shouts his name. We've done the whole shouting the names argument to death in other breakdowns, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think I do remember some type of creator statement that said shouting the names also plays into these transformations announcing their sentience or whatever. Something like that. It's probably worded differently. So perhaps the act of him shouting his name is the signifier of Ultimate Humongosaur coming to life. Ultimate Humongosaur marked him across the face. There's like no transition for the missile hands here though. It's done in like barely a frame. I feel like I'm starting this breakdown off with a ton of negative criticism, but I also feel like I'm comfortable with that because there's a ton of really great things about this episode. But just to lay it on one more time, look at how this background just turns into nothing after a while. Like if you look at the street, this is where the sidewalk should be and other buildings. It really looks like they just gave up here. Maybe they could have gotten away with it if it was like still done in a square format, like how most TVs were before widescreen. I guess that's all right. But even so, man, that's really pushing it. The red robot got rocked. They probably made it a robot just so that Ben can go super hard on him because, you know, standards and practices. Like imagine if that was like an organic being and you're seeing its face all cracked in with blood spewing out. Might actually sell the scene better and play up the intensity. I'm not gonna lie, like I'm not a super gore advocate, but it does add to the tones of these kind of things. But you know, Ben 10's not that kind of show.
My name's not Ben.
Love that line delivery. That's one of those lines that like stick with you. I also like that his eyes actually glow red and aren't just colored red. The way her mana manifests look really good too. Not just the way it forms, but how it's blinking in and out.
Somebody shot the dots off his dice.
What an amusing analogy.
Look at his eyes. They're red.
So I like how the eye color is something that characters are aware of. I probably talked about this before too, because the eye color is also how Gwen was able to deduce it was Ben in the final battle part 2.
Green eyes? Ben?
Evil twin. Got it.
Albedo's back so soon?
He may be under Albedo's control.
Weird error, but how come the credits don't have a drop shadow? They look really stuck on there. Yeah, the credits just blink in and out. No drop shadow, no fade. Hope somebody got fired for that blunder. Everything looks so intense. Despite all the errors so far, I still feel like there's a chance this could get a 5 in visuals already. Let's see if it keeps looking this good for the rest of the episode.
What's happening to...
That's weird though. It's good for like the audience to understand if it's Ben or Ultimate Humongosaur talking, but like it's not like there's a speaker in there that's letting out Ben's voice. Like the giant chest and lungs and esophagus and all of the organs inside of Ultimate Humongosaur, I don't think could ever make a voice that sounds like that.
What's happening to...
He's just too big.
You can't hit me with my own fist! It's mine!
Now I see the eyes blinking back and forth between red and green. You know, I can believe that Kevin can smack Ultimate Humongosaur across a few blocks with a car. I'm more impressed that the car didn't completely shatter when colliding with Ultimate Humongosaur. This method, right down to the camera angle, also mirrors when Spider Monkey did this to Ultimate Kevin.
Mine!
Maybe it's payback in a way.
If I can come up with a spell that will allow Ben's personality to take control again.
Man, Gwen's magic looks amazing in this episode.
Ben!
Don't call me that.
That's creepy. Now we're hearing Ultimate Humongosaur's voice come out of Ben, which also doesn't make biological sense. I guess it's just like, you know, the spirits possessing just have the voice that they're naturally from, so whatever.
It's okay, Gwen.
That's even weirder, surprisingly.
It's...
So it only actually glows when it's Ultimate Humongosaur. When it's Ben, it's green, but it doesn't have that glow effect. So even this small little segment right here is just animated so well. All the posing, all the in-betweens. I'm so glad this episode got the right kind of treatment, because honestly, I adore this episode.
Sleeping spell? Somnus!
Is that the same sleeping spell she used on the Big Chills? It is. Look at that. She has an OP spell, and she does it for more than one episode. Ben 10 fans eating good in this one. And he times out to Ultimate Humongosaur as if Ben was the transformation. Also, random error I figured I'd point out, but the entire episode, his nails are silver when they should be black, although his toes are still black.
Now we get him some help.
This is highly unusual.
I love that they actually brought a therapist into this, and the therapist also showed up too.
My Aunt Sandra said you're the best psychiatrist in town.
Hold it down, will ya?
Wow, the eyes are glowing here though.
Well, it would certainly put a shine on my resume.
Doc here is voiced by Yenny Alvarez, who, yeah, I guess could warrant her own voice actress rather than going to the usual pool, but still, I feel like if they're willing to get her own voice, should have done the same for Conduit Edwards. In fact, the last breakdown I did in The Perfect Girlfriend, they actually got the original voice actor for Ishiyama to come back just to record some grunts and voice Julie's dad, so there's that, I guess, but still, they go to such great lengths for all these random characters, but not like the leader of one of the main antagonists for the series finale. Once again, this is no hate to Jean DiMaggio, but we've heard a lot of John lately. D2, but he has a little bit wider of a range, so it's less noticeable.
Tell me something about your mother.
Tried to eat me before I even hatched!
Later on, we find out that these really are artificial aliens that were brought to life by the Ultimatrix accidentally. So the fact that he has this memory is questionable. My best guess is that similar to zs'skayr, all alien DNA has like some semblance of the actual donors that they were taken from. It's just unlike zs'skayr, they don't maintain the consciousness too. But perhaps this story is true for the original Vaxasaurian whose DNA was sampled for Primus. So he's able to pull that information. Because it's not even like he has Ben's memories. Like, these are completely separate random memories that they have to come from somewhere.
Well, when I was 4, a clown at the circus scared me.
Small callback to his fear of clowns, which was touched on in Last Laugh.
I am alive! I think, I feel, I'm sick of being held captive within this disgusting human!
Sounds a little bit like zs'skayr or Albedo.
Let go, doofus!
He punched himself when he still had red eyes, though. So I wonder if that hurts him. And it's not that the eyes have to be glowing for him to be in control, because here the eyes are green and he's still strangling himself.
The fact that he shares DNA with this creature.
Ultimate Humongosaur is grabbing Ben so violently he's shaking the whole crane. Alright, Ultimate Humongosaur is such a mouthful to say every time. I gotta come up with a name for him. Let's see. Ultimate Humongosaur. We already have Hugh. Mung-go-saur. Saul. Saul's fine. It really doesn't matter. It's just for the sake of addressing him shortly. I'm calling him Saul.
Perhaps if I try to hypnotic trance.
Ha! Like you could hypnotize me!
And Saul's aware of the concept of hypnosis. So does that mean there's hypnosis that exists on Terradino, or is that him sharing the memories with Ben? Honestly, I'm surprised those cables held him that long in the first place.
My head, it hurts!
Ah, poor
You
Saul.
get out! Why won't you leave me alone? Why?
This isn't just blind anger or wrathful resentment. This is true fear and frustration. Honestly, when you think about the conditions of being trapped in the Ultimatrix and then controlled by Ben, that must be terrible. Look how his tail swings all the way around him, though, when he twists. Now that's nuts. Ben is now digitized inside the Ultimatrix. That's pretty crazy.
Anybody?
So I wonder if this little area is also part of the glitch, because Ben actually has been inside of the Omnitrix before too, or at least his consciousness has, and it was just like a weird DNA void.
Whoa, I'm inside the Omnitrix.
But this looks like a full-on city, or maybe it just like looks that way because of the scale. Like a lot of this looks like standard shapes and assets you would see on like a microchip or a circuit board or something. I don't know, this place is never really explained. Like, is this physical? If you had like a super powerful microscope, could you shrink down and look at the Ultimatrix and see Ben in there?
Am I dead? You think he's dead?
That's a pretty funny cut.
And where is he?
In there.
I'm too young to die, and too famous. Handsome, smart, talented, and charming.
See, now he's not even gloating. There's nobody to be telling this to. But I think he's saying all of this just to talk to himself and keep him from panicking. Now, these are pretty cool shots, but like, were they literally underneath this ground the whole time? Or is there like a sub-layer, like a sewer or something that they're rising up from? I know at some point with a show like this you need to just stop asking these typological questions, but I've made this defense before that Ben 10 is a show that offers you a lot of areas where they do explain something like this, or like the technology and the system and the lore of all the weird stuff. So they create these expectations. So it's like, you can't always just say, oh, it's a show, get over it, because sometimes they really do explain it. So the times they don't, it's like, what the hell is going on? He's inside the Ultimatrix and there's this giant city, and now all the ultimates came to life and are bursting from underneath the ground. Like, I'm suspending my disbelief so far, I'm about to fall off the edge.
You're not dead yet.
We go in there, we may never come out again. Go to the watchmaker.
You're talking about Azimuth. Who knows if he'll even help?
I mean, I feel like they could believe Azimuth would help here. I know he's very mad at Ben, but this also concerns his own device if he was going to be selfish about it. But even so, Azimuth does care about Ben.
You try it your way, I'll try it mine.
I like this conclusion, because they're not doing it as in a, oh, whose idea is better, and if you don't like my idea, I'm still going to do what I want. It's a, there's two possible solutions, let's try them both, and hope at least one of them works. Like, this is splitting up for the sake of efficiency, not for the sake of disagreeing. That's why they're such a good couple.
You be careful in there, okay?
You too.
Astro projection, that's such an awesome power. Her anodite form doesn't really line up with her body shape though. Like, not just in positions, but like the literal proportions she has. Maybe that's why they added the swirling background to kind of mask it. Blue skidoo, we can too.
You're not real. You're just parts of me.
Kind of goes against what he was saying when he was defending Eunice.
She's not real. No more alive than any of your transformation.
My transformations are real, and she's way more human than you are.
But again, like the whole ego spiel, this is probably still him just trying to cope and stay sane. He's trying to rationalize the reality he's facing. Because Ben has always respected his transformations, but I feel like it's different when like you actually see them physically in front of you. Then you're kind of like, whoa, let's dial it back a bit. Have we ever actually seen Ultimate Echo shoot waves out of his mouth? It's always out of his discs. In fact, I don't even think we've ever seen him open his mouth. We've seen him make some expressions where it looks open, but usually just stretches the green layer. But this is straight up like Echo's mouth opened up, as if that's how it always is. And of course his webs know to automatically wrap around Ben.
We're not part of you with our own hearts and minds and will.
Even if that's not technically true, the fact that they believe it should be enough. Like, what really defines sentience? That's a whole topic in itself, but if they believe they're real and can act independently, and later at the end of the episode even have their own physical forms, doesn't that make them real? They just weren't organically born, I guess. Also, you might notice that Ultimate Wildmutt's not here. There's no real in-universe excuse for that. That's a blunder. But out of universe, I think that's just because this episode was conceptualized and written before Ultimate Wildmutt was finalized, and his presence wouldn't have really added anything anyways, except for the fact that like he should be there. Like he should be there, but he's not, and that's kind of distracting. But whether or not he's there, it doesn't change the episode at all. In fact, I don't even think Ultimate Cannibal talks, period.
This is the Ultimatrix?
You're our ticket out.
Really weird nitpick, but I'm perplexed how Ben being dragged across the floor is able to kick up dust. Like, where are they? Like, what really is this? Is this a simulation, or is this really happening?
Your mind controls this place. No more you, no more prison.
His mind controls this place. So is Ben creating this just to represent everything? It's the mind space debacle all over again. Hey, the hologram actually phases through as it should, instead of being a physical thing that pushes up something.
Ghost freak.
And another wild part of the episode. Like, this episode has so many surprises. A very casual use of Ghost Freak. I think they could get away with it now. In fact, I think they make it more awesome that he just kind of does it, rather than there being like this whole big deal that he's using Ghost Freak again. We could just assume Ben has him and it's fine.
Now you're under my control.
Also, thematically, it's nice to see him, because another prominent alien, in fact the one that started it all when it comes to possessing Ben, is Ghost Freak. But he's not able to possess the Ultimates. Another OG alien too. And quick changes. I'm loving this. Even if just for a short time, it's impressive that Brainstorm's able to outrun all of these Ultimates. Even Ultimate Cannonbolt. Like, that's not nothing.
I'm one of the good guys. I'm a hero.
Brainstorm's speaking pretty normally here. This makes me think that all of the big words is like purposefully done. Like, Ben does it intentionally. Because right here, Brainstorm is just speaking as Ben.
I didn't do it to you.
Diamond Head. That's pretty neat looking too. Just full on fire streams. We don't see Ultimate Swampfire do that a lot. Although I think we've seen him do it once or twice.
Hero.
Listen to that little sound effect of Ultimate Swampfire closing his fist.
You treat us.
Beautiful. Now, it is pretty surprising that Ben can even have an Ultimatrix inside of the Ultimatrix. With a lot of factors like the vague confirmation that this is all in Ben's head in some way, along with the ultimates just not being as powerful as they should be. But I mean, power scaling alone isn't really valid for Ben 10, but combined with a lot of things, it's a factor. But anyways, I'm not totally sure any of this is even really happening. Like, I don't think Ben is actually turning into aliens here. I don't think he has an Ultimatrix inside of the Ultimatrix. This could all be like happening in spirit, like all of these consciousness exist and Ben's consciousness is in there and his mind is creating all of this so that he can understand it. So I can excuse a lot of, the minor nitpicks for this. I just think it's neat to see Ben fight all of his ultimates and all the quick changing and stuff too. It's really neat looking.
Time to pay for your sins.
Ooh, Ultimate Big Chill is out of focus.
Nobody picks on Ben.
And Anodite Gwen shows up. This episode is so hype. Her hair looks really good too. There's like 2 different tones of color for it. Usually there's just one. Now Kevin's off flying a Galvan Mark II.
You are encroaching Galvan planetary territory.
I wonder what that giant head looks like to the Galvans down on the planet. And the voice too. Is his voice like shattering through half of the Galvan hemisphere? That's gotta be loud.
I hate recordings.
Automatic security systems will destroy your vessel.
Wow, look at that wiggly texture on top of Galvan to give the atmosphere some motion. Every episode has their errors, but overall this episode looks fantastic. The animation, the effects, the choreography, all of it. Loving it. Even something like this, how it's like simple enough that, yeah, I guess it's just a bunch of dots and lasers, but the way they're strategically placed, I think it really works for this shot. And this whole sequence too, that was animated very nicely. We haven't really been like on Galvan before, except for a few shots here and there in War of the Worlds. We're always like inside of Azimuth's tower, but now we're right on ground level.
Wonder if there's bus service back to Earth.
Keeping the texture on the animated piece to blend with the rest of the ship. The glowing effect on the side of Kevin. The animators did not hold back for this one.
Hope he's home.
That is correct.
See, we just had this voice. Like, if you're gonna keep reusing the same generic robot filter for random characters, sure, alright. But at least give us the courtesy of only doing it once per episode. And what's funny is this Galvanic Mechamorph is voiced by Jeff Bennett, whereas the red robot at the beginning was Yuri Lowenthal, but they both sound exactly the same because of this filter.
Everybody will know I'm the toughest guy in the galaxy. That is correct. Also correct.
I'm so sick of this filter. I'm sorry, I'm sick of it.
You're not gonna let me walk up and ring the doorbell, are you?
Love that Azimuth is unfazed by all this. We also finally see another part of his lab other than the main room. Wow. They rendered out a CG model for him. This is also a shot where I feel like the intense shaky cam works really well. This is something that needs it. I only bring that up because there was a lot of shots that, like, I think Alien Force Season 3 was experimenting a lot with, like, shaky cam that just looked terrible. Right here, it looks really good. In motion, that cut between the CG model and the 2D animations looked really good. What's that look like? We're coming in. Wow, it's an instant flip. But it happened so fast, it still looks pretty good. Yeah, that works for me. Now he's much larger. Mass alteration.
Don't think I'm not happy to see you, cuz.
Yeah, Gwen's mana hair looks phenomenal in this episode. I'm gonna have such an easy time talking about the visuals and the ratings because I'm doing most of it here already. Even the fire has its own glow and it cools into the ice to let you know it's ultimate big chill. It's also kind of frustrating because this shows that the series is fully capable of paying attention to even the smallest of details, but most of the time they don't. Well, not most. I should say half of the time. Like a recognizable amount of the time. They do put in a lot more work that we might averagely give them credit for, but it's certainly not the standard. So when we do see it, it's very impressive.
Enough's enough!
So even the hologram looks great. It's still slightly transparent. A couple of episodes have done that. I don't think I pointed it out though, but I like whenever the holograms are actually slightly transparent.
Way big.
That could have used better mixing though. Back to a little bit of criticism. Waybig's voice rarely ever has that big booming I'm gigantic filter. Like in Secret of the Omnitrix especially, like his debut, he actually sounds giant. You hear such trembling bass come out of his voice and it echoes throughout the atmosphere.
Whoa! Check me out! I'm not just big, I'm way big.
Whereas here, it's just D's audio, just raw audio. Every now and then we sometimes get a little reverb on it, but it doesn't sound as good as it used to. Like, he doesn't sound gigantic.
Way big.
Yeah, it's like, eh.
Retreat! Retreat!
Oh, look how Ultimate Big Chill's wings are slightly overlapping him. That looks really cool.
You heard me.
Saul's up to something. Could've used some extra sound effects there, though. Seeing Ultimate Echo Echo fly without his sound effects looks weird. It's like he's just floating away. See, those footsteps sound gigantic, though. They should, whatever they're doing to the footsteps, throw that onto D's track. That sounds large.
Kind of liberal with the transformations.
Trying to run down the battery.
That's a good point. Ben doesn't change this quickly as he has in this episode, and it probably is because of the battery. But I still like seeing it regardless of the reason. It's just cool to see Ben switch between forms a lot.
Figured if I timed out, it would send me back. No such luck.
Probably no luck because none of this is even real. There is no battery to run out because none of this is really happening. At least that's what I'm assuming.
Guess I'm more anodite than I thought.
Don't tell Omniverse that.
The Ultimates say they're really alive.
See, now you're hearing the footsteps at the same time as his voice. Like, it's such a small thing, but I would have appreciated it.
You didn't know it was happening. And what can you do to stop it anyway?
That's quite the dilemma. Yeah, Ben really didn't know this was happening. But it's like, if the solution at the end of this episode didn't happen, and Ben was able to just escape the Ultimatrix, could he just go back to using these forms, knowing what he knows now? I feel like that would make me want to never use the Ultimatrix again. Maybe I could free all of them and convince them to fight alongside me, and then put my plumber training to use. But if I knew that this is how the transformations were, and the issue didn't get resolved at the end of the episode, I don't think I could keep doing it. Everybody's getting wrapped up. It's the fiery pit. I like that her glow appears on the darker parts, and you still see changes of elevation. And when the elevation changes, the shape of the glow changes as well. See, so many beautiful details here.
Guess you got me.
And the red lighting on them, too.
You lured me here, right?
I mean, I'm surprised it took Saul and the gang this long to lure them here. Before they retreated, they were, like, so close to the red aura right here. That's like, what, maybe 3-4 way big stomps at most, and that's being generous. But they spend a whole sequence of way big walking so far and so long. And now they're, like, exactly where they were before this whole thing. I think they just needed to write in a moment for Ben and Gwen to have this conversation. But maybe instead of the Ultimates trying to lure them there, because let's face it, there's not enough distance for that to make sense. They all scattered and they have to like go around and look for them first or something. I don't know. That's nuts. This is straight up sacrificial. You can see why the episode's called The Ultimate Sacrifice.
On second thought,
Oh, the battery really did run out. I don't know then, like every time I think I got this whole scenario figured out, something else happens. This fire is looking really good.
It's over, Tennyson.
Ooh, part of Saul is not colored in right here.
That's enough!
Love the lighting change over to Gwen. Look at Ultimate Swamp Fire right here though. That is quite the face.
you used that power for too long.
I risk losing my humanity.
We're back to that? I mean, I've always liked that aspect of Gwen's powers. Like, I wish we delved even more into, like, the Anodite lore. But I mean, it's been forever since this has been brought up. I just figured, like, it's just not part of the story anymore. It feels a bit random to have to care about this after so long of just not even acknowledging it.
I'm destroying these transformations, Ben.
Stand down. There's only one way out of this. In order for the Ultimates to live, I have to die.
I just want to say I love that they're playing this straight. Like, this is a pretty weird scenario when you really think about it, of all these like random factors concluding to this moment. But if the final linchpin to all of this is that Ben needs to kill himself in order to free the Ultimates, then yeah, that's something they should take seriously. And they take this seriously all through and through. No jokes, no weird quirky music to offset the voice actor's delivery. They're just like, yeah, Ben might have to kill himself here, and we're gonna show you the severity of that implication.
Tennyson may have messed up the Ultimatrix, put himself on the line again and again.
This is one of Kevin's most popular moments as well. It's a culmination of everything he's learned and all of the growing he's done throughout UAF. He's a totally different person than he was in Ben 10 Returns Part 1.
He's risked his life 100 times for people he didn't even know.
As has Kevin and Gwen, but right now he's just trying to make Azimuth realize of all the things that Ben has done, that should be enough for Azimuth to put aside his grievances with Ben and hear him out. Which again, I mean, I still don't don't feel like Azimuth would not have helped Ben if Kevin didn't go through with all of this. I feel like this scene is more about showing how Kevin has evolved and changed as a character, rather than actually trying to convince Azimuth to help them.
He's a hero, and more important, he's my best friend.
I love that scene so much.
You could have called first.
I didn't have your number.
See, there's still some moments for levity there too. And it's also a valid point. Like, they really should have a way to contact Azimuth when they need.
You are evolving.
I don't want to dig too far into that, but that line was confirmed to used to mean something in relation to Kevin's growing Osmosian abilities. But it's never brought up again, and then Osmosians are retconned, so it's whatever.
Perhaps there's the tiniest speck of hope for this universe, after all.
But also shows that Kevin's word and boldness to come straight to Azimuth begging for help is changing Azimuth and making him come back around and pull himself out of his grouchy attitude. I think that's really going to help Azimuth and Ben get on good terms with each other again. It's so hard to commentate on this because I want to just watch the episode. Thanks, Bruce. But another great part of this scene is the score. It's not the typical Ultimate Alien tracks. I do feel like UA scores a lot more of its tracks than we give it credit for as well. I just think a lot of the tracks sound very similar. We might not be able to distinguish the pieces as much as like Omniverse music or classic. But every now and then we get like an original score just for one scene. The tone, the delivery, especially the art playing into this too. I like that we're getting such strong lighting choices. They could not have done this scene better. Absolute 10 out of 10 execution.
Let me say goodbye to Gwen.
Do you think we're fools?
Does seem like a trap.
Let him say his goodbyes.
Good guy Saul.
He deserves that much, at least.
I feel like that also shows that deep down Saul really does know it's not Ben's fault, that all of them are trapped inside the Ultimatrix. I think they're just way too frustrated with their lifestyle and are willing to kill Ben regardless just for their freedom. So now it's less about understanding it was a mistake and more prioritizing their lives over Ben's. And Ben's selfless enough to let that happen.
What's the plan?
See, even Gwen thought it was a trick.
No plan. I don't know why they branched off and became individuals, but I know that they deserve to live free.
Ben's willing to do this even though he doesn't really understand it either. I give Ben a lot of crap, but deep down he's always a hero at his core, and he's willing to die for the sake of 6 artificial beings he just met just because they're begging for freedom. Saul earlier was like tormented because of the frustrations his life is being trapped in the Ultimatrix and used as a transformation slate for Ben. And yeah, I feel like that's enough to warrant taking them seriously. Created or not, these are real beings now, and Ben respects that and will die for them.
They deserve to live free.
So do you.
Goodbye, Gwen.
And also because like the world isn't at stake or either. I feel like what makes the sacrifice so significant is Ben doesn't even have to do this. It's not like if Ben doesn't do this, the world's gonna end and the Ultimates are gonna take over the world and this and that. There's nobody after them. He can easily just have Gwen kill all the Ultimates, find a way to escape the Ultimatrix, and put all this behind him. This is 100% optional, but he's still willing to do it. I think that's a bigger testament to him being a hero than any amount of saving the world. It's putting others before yourself.
But I never meant for you to suffer, any of you, and I'm sorry.
You know, if they really wanted to milk this concept, they could just end the episode right there and say to be continued. And the whole part 2 could be about trying to find a place for the Ultimates in the world. I think that's where this episode kind of falls off, is that the Ultimates are freed and they go off and we never see them again. And then it never even comes up again. All of that I feel like undermines this a little bit. Like I think now that the Ultimates are freed and Ben gets to live, it would be nice to see where their stories go from there. But also, what did this look like physically from an outside perspective? Did all of them just like spawn out of the Ultimatrix?
Your sacrifice reset the Ultimatrix.
Could that have been a failsafe or something? Because Ben fully believed he was killing himself by jumping into the pit. And as Saul said earlier, this is all inside of his head. So maybe because in the mind world, Ben killed himself, for a second the Ultimatrix actually believed that Ben died and thus shut down and started rebooting himself to try to save him. That's a precursor to the anti-death failsafe that the Omnitrix device has. But then again, Charmcaster succeeds in killing Ben anyways later on, so I mean, who really knows what all of this even was?
The flaw that generated the self-actualized Ultimates has been corrected.
So this shows that Saul did have fake memories and he was artificially created. And it was a glitch. This wasn't supposed to happen.
Any Ultimates generated from this moment forth will simply be reflections of you.
A guilt-free transformations.
Why am I still alive?
Your intention was what mattered to the Ultimatrix. Genuine self-sacrifice. More rare than astatine or francium.
Are either of those anything?
Astatine or francium francium.
Astatine is a rare element on Earth's crust, and francium is a chemical element, so both of those are real things. Somehow I feel like that's weirder than them being like made up words, like space elements that you couldn't find on Earth or something. Maybe Earth is just full of rare elements. I mean, iron's apparently rare in the Ben 10 world according to Volcanus.
That's twice today I have found a small measure of hope.
You didn't close it all the way, Azimuth.
Where do we go?
See, that could be a whole episode on its own. You could also probably take him to Primus just to like hang out there. I'm sure Eunice can use company. She's probably pretty bored.
Somewhere out there is a planet where you can be free.
Or it would be interesting to see them interact with like their home cultures. Like what if Saul went to Terradino? So many ways to explore this. I don't want this to end. So his teleport effect is blue, but his portal effects are green. Yeah, this man did not say a single word this whole time.
We were wrong about you.
I can't say I blame you.
No, I told you so or anything. This whole episode of Ben, like everything, all the small parts, even when he was talking up himself in private, like this is my favorite version of Ben.
Burgers?
My treat. It's the least I can do for my best girl and my best friend.
Such a wholesome ending too. Yeah, so no surprise, this is one of my favorite episodes of all time. It's very enjoyable for me. A lot of what I look for in the show is right here. But as I always say with the ratings, I gotta play fair, and I can only give this a 4 in a plot. As I was saying earlier, Ben 10 is a show that does in some form care about its own lore and its own methods in the way like aliens work and technology works and stuff. And there was just a bit too much randomness in this episode for me to accept. It still makes a great story. I still think the plot is very solid, but it's distracting. Like you can't watch this episode without thinking in the back of your head, like, what's really going on right now? Like, is this real? How are these Ultimates alive? Why is there a glitch that brought them to life? How is Ben transforming inside of the Ultimatrix? It's just, it's too much to hand wave. And I think that alone just makes it not perfect. Like you gotta excuse a lot, not just for the sake of it being a show, but excuse a lot of what you know about Ben 10 in order to make this work. But other than that, I think this episode works very well. I think despite the concept not making much sense, it's interesting enough to keep you engaged all the way through it. But despite not being able to let go of how crazy the concept is, what it does with it is why this episode is so good. And there's a lot of really fun moments in this episode as well. Gwen using her astral projection, Ben casually using Ghost Freak, Kevin flying off to Galvan Mark II to fight a mechamorph. The whole therapy session at the beginning, like I feel like once you get pretty deep in this episode, you forget about that scene. The characterizations can definitely get a 5. This is the trio not only written at their peak, but also, I don't want to say deconstructed, because we've seen them deconstructed before. This is more of like a reward for the audience seeing these characters grow. Like the way they are in this episode really shows the journey that they've been through, how they see the world, how they handle these situations, how powerful they've gotten, and the respect that Ben has for his alien transformations. Saul was also a great character. He wasn't much on his own. He was more of just the mouthpiece for the other Ultimates, but he was also much more than just a filler slot for this kind of character. Like they could have been much lazier with him and this would still work, but you do see the genuine pain he goes through being trapped in the Ultimatrix. You do see that he has like sympathy for Ben. You see that he's willing to listen to reason. Like this episode doesn't just tell you that the Ultimates are alive, they show you. And I think this episode does enough to make you believe it without like stuffing it down your throat. Also, the Doc was a pretty cool character. And I think it was a great choice to have Kevin be the one to break through to Azimuth and have him finally start turning around and seeing the trio in a more positive light again. He was kind of already on that path at the end of Alien Force Season 3, but the frustrations of the Greg arc started pushing them away again. I don't know, there's just a lot of great stuff here. Visuals is a solid 5. In importance, I'm gonna give it a 3. Yeah, plot-wise, this doesn't have much going for it, but it is a very memorable episode. I think this really captures the essence of Ben 10. It lays out who these characters are and how far they've grown on this journey. And it's fun to speculate about the logistics of the Ultimatrix dream world, or whatever you want to call it. Like, this episode still is frequently brought up, and it's become a fan favorite for all of the UA fans. It does feel like you'd be missing out a little bit if you skipped this one, even if you did just want to watch the strictly plot-only ones. But I can't give it any more than a 3. A 3 is already pretty generous. And entertaining, 5. Just 5. That leaves this episode off at a 22 out of 25. A very high score for a very highly regarded episode. I wish I could give it a perfect score, but it's not quite there. But a 22 is still very acceptable. Let's move on to the final thoughts. So this is one of those episodes where the more you think about it, there's still just countless questions that pile up. Why does killing Ben set the Ultimates free? How does a glitch just randomly create life? It's a very hard episode to excuse, and I feel like they pull off the execution so well that that it doesn't matter, but it also kind of does. But I think an interesting angle to take this episode would have been using this as a way to have Ben lose his ultimate forms forever. Ultimate Alien never ended up focusing on the actual ultimate aliens as we would have liked, and whatever plot they were trying to make with them just didn't end up happening. So I think it would have been a creative solution if in this episode, when the Ultimates escape, Ben can no longer go ultimate, and that way there's a satisfying conclusion to the Ultimates arc, if you can even call it an arc, as him just losing that ability at the end of the series just really hits the nail in the coffin on how poor of an idea it was to give Ben evolved alien transformations. And of course, if you take a look at last week's poll, you just can't beat the Super Alien Hero Buddy Adventures. Of all 3 times Ben's identity has been plagiarized, this one seems to be the most notable. And of course it has the advantage of being the first one to do it. It's still the most fun, as the other 2, while are also pretty enjoyable episodes, the first one is the only one where it really seems like that's the point of the episode. For this week's poll, since this episode was filled with a lot of fun scenes and surprises, which one was your favorite? Was it the return of Ghost Freak, Gwen using her Anodite form for more than a few seconds, Ben willingly sacrificing himself, or Kevin's speech to Azimuth? Let me know what you think in the community tab when this video goes live. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And as always, keep it fizzy.